Welcome to the Art Studio Insights podcast, where we demystify the creative process and exchange ideas with career-minded artists. We are your hosts, Adriana May and
Jackie Sanders. We are two emerging artists sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our journey. And if you are not already, please subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every week. All right, so we get this question all of the time from other emerging artists or artists visiting the studios of how do I find my art style, my creative style? I make so many different things. How do I narrow it down to just one? And we talk about this all the time, especially as we have both evolved as artists together. And honestly, this is okay to have a wide variety of styles if making art is just your hobby. We both love playing with the variety of mediums and concepts. And if it's a hobby, you can explore anything and everything because you're just doing what you love doing and enjoying the time creating. But as if you're growing to create a business, this can be a little confusing from a brand perspective. It's just like with any other company. If you were to go to a shoe store and they're serving food as soon as you walk in, that's a little misleading. So it's changing your expectations of what you can expect. And so the goal for a lot of people is to create a style that they want to be known for. But this does take time, and there's really no getting around the whole process. So today we're going to discuss how to find and explore that style that you want to be known for and balancing multiple styles at one time.
Exactly. And I'll start by saying, like, if you're a self-taught artist, honestly, it's like a buffet. There are so many choices. No one's going to tell you, what order you need to do things in. You can do whatever you want. However, look, the good parts, right? If you're self-motivated, you would rather learn at your own pace. You want to explore a specialized discipline that maybe it's not taught locally. Perhaps you can't afford art school, or all of the above, right? Then the self-taught route may be the way to go. And also with that, I do want to kind of throw in there. So we do hear this from other artists where they say, well, I wasn't, I didn't go to art school. I am not a proper artist. Look, just, move that aside. Artists come from all kinds of backgrounds. I mean, I've known of lawyers, I've known of accountants, scientists, people in IT, medical professionals. I mean, they are trained in those disciplines, and they still, even though they can't afford art school, they decide to switch into art. They are successful in their practice. I mean, and they could have afforded it and they choose not to. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I went to business school and my background is in investments.
Right.
And I feel no shame. Like, it's fine. Like, everybody has the potential to be creative. So if you're self-taught, like, please don't play the shame game. It is okay. Like, just do your thing. Do you? Also with that, do want to point out, like, unless you have a specific set, or a specific style that you're set on mastering, chances are you will be all over the place at first. Give yourself some grace. It's good to explore, but we're also going to be talking about, like, how to not just stay all over the place. Like, you eventually have to narrow that down. I will say from my end, I've taken several art classes in college. I've spent hundreds of hours with instruction since. One of my favorite parts is I've been able to customize the format, the topic, the speed based on my interest, based on my budget, based on my available time. So from in-person summer workshops, the classes in school, month-long online courses, or 3-month, structure programs. I mean, even from books, I mean, it runs the gamut. There's a lot of choices available. Also, something else to note, depending on what discipline you're interested in, you may find that if it has specialized or expensive equipment, even if you're going the self-taught route, some of those classes you may still need to do through a college. What comes to mind is like metal sculpture class and pottery, where you need a kiln. You may still have to go that route. It may just be for that specific class, but just know, just because you're self-taught doesn't mean you can't look at that as an option. And then also, to know whether it's through college or not, just keep an eye. There's always a cost associated with learning the materials, the equipment, the books, the instruction itself. So it can be expensive either way.
Yeah,
Just keep an eye
definitely.
out on that, to keep it from being too overwhelming from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. But like you were saying, even if you're self-taught and taking on all these classes and workshops on your own, that is a very similar process to the academic world. I come from academia. I went through in high school, in college, got a bunch of different art classes and was able to train under essentially masters in their field, which is so, so cool. But that's kind of that price you pay with academia, right? You're paying to be exposed to all these different styles, all these different art history courses. And what you're really paying for is that opportunity to learn under professionals. But like Adriana was just saying, you can do that as a self-taught artist. You just have to be disciplined in really seeking those opportunities. There's no one forcing you to do that. So academia kind of lays it out as, okay, you are required to take a wide foundation of classes. So let's say pottery or oil painting or watercolor, you're actually expected to take those different courses. And then as you go on, you then can build upon, okay, I really want to go in the oil painting route. You can take level 2 or level 3 or level 4, and really focus in on whatever medium you want to pursue. But really having that hands-on instruction, building from semester to semester is really what makes I felt like academia worth it for me in terms of it was a lot easier to learn a wide range of subjects a lot quicker because it is in that structured path. And there's definitely the downsides to that structured path. Sometimes they might not offer a class that you necessarily want to take that semester and you have to take one anyway. Obviously, the finances is a huge expense, and not an option for everyone. But I absolutely loved having that quick, I thrive on structure setting. So it was a great fit for me of really finding my creative voice and style, because it gave me enough exposure to a wide foundation of things to then spark interest, saying, okay, I definitely want to explore this more, or I'm never touching this medium again. I absolutely hated every second of it. Moving on, cross that off the list of things I might want to explore. But it just does take time in order to find your style. It takes time and really intentional practice because it is ever evolving. Our professors always told us, like, yes, these classes are going to be helpful. We're going to teach you the foundation. We're going to teach you all these different things. But your creative style is a lifelong process. It's not like, okay, I'm going to do 3 semesters of college, do these courses, and come out a master oil painter.
Are you
Like,
sure?
no. I mean,
I'm just
that'd be
kidding.
nice. The ROI of art school would be great if you just came out famous, but it doesn't
Yeah.
exactly work that way. You're paying for the instruction, you're paying for the hands-on like apprenticeship and the opportunities that can come with networking. But in order for your style to really evolve, what you have to do is really lay that foundation. And I think that's what both you and I have learned, Adriana, is like laying that foundation and then narrowing it down to 2 or 3 different themes or mediums that you really want to explore and focus in on those, and then seeing what happens. So as your style evolves within those 2 or 3, how do you feel about the work that you're creating? What's the feedback that you're getting? And really making sure that, yes, you want to make work that other people connect with or enjoy seeing, but also making sure if this is work that you're making truly because you like it, not just because it's the trendy thing to do or the popular thing at the time, because that's changing so much. Is this truly work that you get excited about finishing a piece because you already have 5 other ideas that are in that realm?
Exactly. And that just goes into, this sense of exploration, so sometimes you do need to shut those outside voices. What about this? Can you add a bird here? Make it, or a tree, or no, like try to listen to your inner self. This exploration is going to look different for everyone. Some folks are going to dip their toe in every single medium there is until they find the one. Some people find it right away. All we can do is, share with you kind of like what our approach looks like. And, hopefully this will be helpful in your journey.
Yeah. And our backgrounds are very different in it, which I think is so funny.
Yeah, I definitely come from a very left brain background, very analytical, spreadsheets and financial markets and things like that. It's very different, but that is okay. Whatever your background looks like, there is a way to make this work. So let me go ahead and share with you kind of what my approach is. So with mine, one of the ways I see it is I go for similar color palettes and techniques, but I am applying them to different subject matters, because one of my biggest goals is, if I paint a bird, a landscape, a flower, it doesn't matter. I want it to be obvious that I did it, if that makes sense. So some of the ways that I, kind of work on that is to do, number one, I had to pick 2 to 3 styles, right? I would paint everything, a few years back, I was painting anything, like seriously, but I had to narrow it down, practice makes progress. So
Yes.
I started with, or some of the latest things I've narrowed it down to are abstract landscapes and botanicals. And then any other styles or themes that I'm interested in exploring, I save them down for later. So there's a wide range. I want to do a series on planets, on mythology, on architecture. All that can wait. Like, it's not going anywhere. It's fine. You can also create a Pinterest board that you can look at later. So if you feel pulled in all these different directions, just know you can save it. You can reference it later on down the road. But whatever you're picking now, try to stick with it. So for that, you also want to narrow down the mediums that you're using. So I used to use everything. Just about, that person I said tries every, yeah, that was me. So in my case, I've narrowed it down. I mostly work with acrylics and oils mixed with cold wax. And then if I'm going to add any other mediums, they're kind of like the complement, right? And they come in as needed, like oil pastels or oil graphite. But for the most part, you could say like, these are my main mediums, and you just kind of like almost everything you do, you crank it out with those. And then the other thing you want to consider is when you say, okay, I'm interested in the style. Let's say it is botanicals, right? You're going to want to try to create at least 20 pieces in that style. Now, you may want to sketch it out first, digitally or on paper, and have some of those compositions laid out in advance. It's hard, okay? Like, especially when you're like, I really want to do this. Let's say you pick birds or florals, whatever. Like, it may be hard at first to try to make 20 of the same thing. And I'm not saying, oh, I want to paint a rose, I'm going to make 20 roses. No, if I'm going to do botanicals, I'm going to pick different botanicals. If I'm going to do birds, different birds, right? You want to make 20 of them. And then you're going to try to see if you can push through it. Which can be so hard. Now, this is, to me, this is how you find out if you really like it or not. So you're going to try to push through it. If you can't make it through, that is okay, right? Give yourself some credit, celebrate the win, see how far you can get. That might just be a sign that that's not a topic you're that interested in. But if you do, you got to celebrate that win, keep going, see how you can evolve it further, see, what kind of iterations you can get out of it. Maybe I'll change the angles, the compositions, the colors, same theme, just a different version of it. Just keep going with it, see where you can take it.
Yeah. And this is not going to be like a 1 week process either.
Oh, no.
I mean, if you're thinking of relatively quick works on paper, then maybe, but like if you're just doing like color studies, then you might be able to do a series of them or a couple series. But that's the one thing with setting the focus goal of creating 20 in that series. It might take you 6 months. It might take you 2 years. But really focusing in that expectation of, okay, I'm going to explore this medium, this subject matter, this theme for 20 pieces it's going to take time and it should feel a little overwhelming. I don't want people to think that, well, that's super intimidating and overwhelming.
Yeah.
That must mean it's not my correct style. Like it's supposed to be scary.
And do pace yourself, it's
Right.
not make 20 in a week. I mean, maybe you are that fast. Okay, sure.
Right.
Right. Um, more
But it's
power
all
to
about
you,
like,
but
it's
yeah,
about what you learn during that process.
exactly. And then that basically takes me, yeah, thank you. That takes me to the next point. As you go through it, you're not a factory cranking out, these
Mhm.
paintings. Oh, I'm going to make 20 minutes and I'm done. No, because then you're just rushing through it. You actually want to take the time to notice what you actually like that you want to carry on to the next piece, to the next style, to the next subject matter, to the next medium, whatever the case may be. So, like, for example, for me, I'm like some of my big elements that I keep an eye on or like narrow down. I'm like, I always want to make sure no matter what I work in, there's some sort of tactile texture going on, that there's background layers that peek through, that there's gestural marks, that
Mhm.
I'm working in a specific palette of colors. So it's not just, oh, I'm going to make 20 random things and all
Right.
kinds of, no, you're literally trying to make it a little more cohesive. And by keeping a list of what some of these elements you're interested in as you find them, where you go, ooh, what was that? I need to write that down. I need to carry it over again. Keep that somewhere visible. That's actually going to help make your body of work look more cohesive. So
Right.
if again, it's kind of like what Jackie was talking about before, you want to think about what do you want to be known for in your work. So take note as you do these different practices we're talking about. And, whatever those are, that's only dictated by you, nobody else. That's what
Mhm.
you want to pay attention to and carry it over. How about you, Jackie? What's your approach?
Yeah, so I feel like because, like I mentioned earlier, I have that academic background, that wide foundation of different styles. Through that, I was able to learn what I naturally gravitate towards. So after graduating, I kind of felt like I was already at that next level of, okay, I have this big foundation. What do I want to focus on? And all throughout my creative development, I guess, over the past 12 years, since I've consistently been focused on making a style and a body of work, I always come back to abstract geometric forms and geometric lines. Inevitably, I know that's definitely influenced by my parents having their own architecture firm, growing up at the sketching table using rulers and grid paper to design things when I was 10 years old. That's definitely an inevitable influence. But inherently, I think that does automatically unify my work, which is a silver lining blessing. And so, really, what I'm now exploring is taking the ideas and concepts that I developed through that wide foundation of materials and applying them to my geometric work. So, all of my work really explores the balance of opposites, yet like linked concepts. So, structure versus gestural marks, nature and man made forms, light and shadow, concepts and creative practices where you are super in control versus super out of control. So, like, as my work evolves, I really seek to unify it through those concepts rather than just one medium. But throughout my evolution, I've really given myself permission to focus in on mediums over the past 12 years. So, like in high school, I really focused on colored pencil and sketching on Bristol board because that was the only thing I was really exposed to. It was a material that was relatively approachable, it wasn't super intimidating, didn't require a high, like we talked about earlier, a high financial entry point besides getting the pencils. It's not like oil painting where you have all these different tools and oils that you have. Because there is that startup cost essentially. So in high school, I'm like, great, I'm comfortable with colored pencils. Let me explore this. Then through college, obviously with a structured course, I was able to apply that to watercolor or oil painting or acrylic painting, sculpture. And then now, since after graduating, really exploring more of acrylic painting. I found that I loved that medium just for the quickness of you can create multiple pieces at one time. It can dry relatively fast compared to other mediums. And then also incorporating digital production into my work too. So through high school and then after college skill development, I focused on digital production and how I can incorporate that with those same concepts that I was exploring even 12 years ago. So now, even though I'm still exploring a wide variety of mediums, I feel like they're all unified by my geometric aesthetic. So even when I feel like, oh, I feel like this is totally new and different for me, I get the feedback a lot of, no, this is very obviously your work. There's like
I know.
geometric lines and shapes. And I'm like, this just feels so out of my comfort zone.
I know. Jackie will be like, does this still look like me? And I'm like, are you kidding? Yes, it does.
Yeah.
It's definitely a Jackie piece.
So it's also, that brings up the conversation too of like you can almost not be trusted of having your own perspective on your work. So it is very interesting. So Adriana and I both have studios where we interact with the public a lot. That's a great way to get feedback on your work, whether it's strangers, whether it's family and friends, to see, okay, do they feel like this is a cohesive body or work? Or if they had to pick four that went together, which four would they pick? Because that having that perspective is super, super helpful when trying to create a focus in your style.
But grain of salt, always take it with a grain of salt.
Yes, but like, yes, grain of salt, picking and choosing the feedback that you have. And that is one
that you find the most constructive. Yeah.
that is one lesson from a lot of the critiques that I had in college that was super helpful. So at the end of every project, we'd have a group critique with professors and other students. And I think that kind of like forces you to have a tough skin about your work. Yes, taking constructive criticism, but also realizing, okay, just because someone says, oh, here's a nature scene, it would be so great if there was like you were saying, a bird right in the front. And in your head, you're like, I don't want to paint a bird there, but this person said I should, so maybe I should. Like you can consider that as an option, process it, but then do that soul searching and realize, is this how I want the piece to look? Or is that just one person's opinion? If you're getting the same feedback from multiple people that have not crossed paths, maybe then it might be more incentive to think about that more. But even then, it's your work, it's your style.
You do you, boo.
Right, exactly. But by being able to focus in and take that foundation and focusing in on either two or three themes, two or three concepts, two or three mediums, it can almost make the process less overwhelming. Which I feel like a lot of the artists that come to us and ask these questions, that's what they're feeling. It's overwhelmed. There's so many options. There's so many different ways you can take your creative work. And almost by giving yourself, like managing your own expectations, right? Like by focusing in on, okay, these are the two things I'm focused on. I'm going to keep a list of any other ideas that come into my head. I'm going to write it down. They're not gone forever. They're there that I can explore when I'm done my 20 pieces. But for now, I'm doing these two. And there's almost like a weight that comes off your shoulders of being able to, rather than being pulled in 10 different directions, just focus in on these two, let that weight lift off your shoulders and be like, I don't even have to worry about this because that's not my time. I'm focusing on these. It makes it so much easier because then you can actually make progress on those two things rather than being pulled in a million directions and not actually getting anything done, which I know we've all felt that way.
Exactly. And that's one of those things where it's like, if we were to summarize this real quick, right? Both your approach and mine are very similar in terms of like, we have all these things we want to do, but we know to separate out, okay, if we were to put this on a priority list, what do I want to explore now? The rest can wait. It's not forever. We'll get back to it later, but whatever we're doing now, we get from it what we want to move over to the next step or the next style or the next medium. In other words, you don't have to do all the things.
Yeah, and I
It's
think that's a
okay.
conversation we go into a lot is about like scheduling your priorities. And like we can have these long lists of one day I want to do this, one day I want to do that, one day I want to do this, whether it's your creative practice, whether it's artwork you want to make, whether it's your business. But until you schedule, okay, I am going to explore botanicals for the next 3 months, and that is what I'm scheduled to do, then you know that's actually going to happen rather than having this master list that you might pull from like a day, but then you fizzle out and you don't touch it for 3 months. Like I was saying, like being pulled in so many directions, you don't actually end up doing anything. So by being able to focus in on those 2 or 3 and really scheduling, okay, my creative time is focused on this, that's how you actually make progress on it.
Yeah, and then it's also important as you do that, it doesn't mean you can't play with other mediums and subjects. If you say, my
Yeah.
meat and potatoes, these are my main subjects that I am completely focused on, you can still have other things you dabble in. It just means you're aware of what your
Mhm.
priorities are. So, like, for example, on the side, I will play with cyanotypes and other photosensitive chemicals. I play with lino cuts and printmaking. I'll play with pottery, like slab building style. Like, it doesn't matter because for me, if it comes down to it and my time's limited and I only have 2 hours, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to paint. Like,
Right.
and I'm going to paint in the styles that I have narrowed it down to. So also don't feel like, oh, I can only do this one thing. I'm doing, watercolor birds. So that's all I can. No, you can still do other things, but keeping the focus on, okay, if birds and watercolors I want to evolve, then
Mhm.
that is what my main focus is going to be. Other things are literally just on the side.
Right.
So
And that's like the awareness element too. It's like making that conscious choice of, okay, today I'm not feeling this. I need a little break maybe from my focus. I'm just going to play today. And that's totally fine. Like you were saying, at least you're making the conscious choice to do that rather than just running around with your hair on fire for 3 months. It's like taking that scheduled time, like I'm acknowledging this is a break from my focus, but that's okay. And sometimes that's what you need. And it might then influence a new direction that you take that focus. Like, oh, maybe I want to incorporate one of the designs I use for a piece of pottery into this series that I am focused on. And that's what kind of breathes life back into your focus.
you said that, and all I can think about is like, I mean, there's a painting I did recently where another artist, actually a potential collector, who's also an artist, was asking me what tool did I use for it, and I was like, actually, a tool that I use that's used for pottery.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could find a new
It's
tool and be
literally a
like,
pottery tool, and once I used it in, like, with clay itself, I was like, "I wonder if this would work with paint," and then, oh, it
right.
sure does. So,
Yes.
you never know how some of those things, some of those concepts you learn in some of those other disciplines can bring over to whatever your main one is, but that's why we're like, we're just saying, just narrow it down, explore it fully before you move on, and if you do dabble in other
Right.
things, just prioritize what's your main, what's on the side. And then with that, um, a few, to summarize some of the things we've been saying, if you've been struggling to balance multiple styles, there's a lot of things you want to explore. Here's a quick summary of like some of our tips from today, a quick recap. So select 2 or 3. I mean, if you want to
Mhm.
select just one, that's fine too, by the way. But select 2 or 3 and attempt a serious attempt at making 20 of each. Um, Learn from the process. Be honest with your motivations. What do you like? Not everybody else. What do you like? What
Yep.
don't you like? Right? Write down what elements are calling to you that you want to carry across the work. Keep that list visible. Simple piece of paper tacked to the wall. Nothing fancy here. This is going to change over time, right?
Yeah.
Give yourself permission to see what happens. And just remember, this is an ever evolving process. You got to keep exploring, in order to discover what actually resonates with you. It needs to resonate with you first. So, with that,
Yes.
Jackie, do we have a quote to finish
Yeah.
this off with?
Yes. So today's quote to send us off into the week and explore a wide foundation of mediums comes from a man, not sure if you've heard of him. His name is Vincent van Gogh. He's kind of popular. So his quote is, if you hear a voice within you saying you are not a painter, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. And I absolutely love this quote because a huge part of the creative process is that self-doubt, those self-limiting beliefs that creep into our minds, whether we acknowledge them or not, they are there. And really, what he's saying is just do it, just focus in and create. Then who can say that you are not an artist? Who can say that you are not someone in this style? So being brave enough to explore a wide variety of mediums, but then really focusing in when it feels right, because that's when the good stuff happens.
Yes, it does.
All right, that's a wrap on today's conversation, and we hope you enjoyed this episode.
Both of our blogs will be linked in the show notes, where you can find full episode notes, resources, and links for every podcast episode.
If you want to stay connected with us in between episodes and share what you have learned, you can follow us on social media. I'm May Art across all platforms.
And I'm J Sanders Studio across all platforms. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.